Hello, everybody. Welcome to Appreciating Poetry. I'm your host, Dr. Kelly. We've been looking at the origin of poetry in song. And so now we've been looking at Songs of Innocence by William Blake. William Blake, very unusual, indeed unique artist who wrote poems that are among the most famous in the English language. Apparently, he set some of these poems that he called songs to music, although the music is lost. And he was also a first-rate visual artist, and he invented a way of making a composite artwork that was text and visual art handmade into a book. These are today very valuable artifacts, and they possess a nearly infinite depth that they just seem to be inexhaustibly rewarding. So here is the frontispiece to Songs of Innocence. And in the top, we get the text, and it's completely interwoven with this imagery of plants and animals and people and flight and freedom from gravity. And in the bottom half of the picture, we have the real world. We have two children with their feet on the ground. We have a maternal figure holding apparently open a book on her lap, and the children are not merely looking at the book, but sort of fondling the book. Now, the first poem is called Introduction to Innocence. And in the top quarter of the picture, we see this child flying. In the text, it says, I saw a child. On a cloud, I saw a child. So here's the child floating on a cloud, and this man has just jerked his head back, looking up at the child. In the text of the poem, we saw that the child issued certain commands, which the adult figure here obeys without hesitation. And this establishes one of the most important aspects of Songs of Innocence, which is the relation of innocence, which means faultlessness, guiltlessness, the relation of innocence to experience. Innocence needs experience. And as I hope we'll see, experience needs innocence. Innocence needs experience to protect and sustain innocence. It's important that we remember that it's not songs of good and evil. It's not exclusive opposites. That the growing, the developing into experience, or say the gathering of experience as one matures, does not mean that innocence is lost. So this is not about the loss of innocence. It's about the relation of innocence to experience in society, the way children depend upon adults, but also within the individual, that the innocent part of us lives in a relation with the experienced part of us. So the child in this image issues commands to the adult obeys, and those commands, there's 4 of them. Pipe a song about a lamb, so I piped with merry cheer. I guess we ought to look at the bottom half, where we have a whole bunch of sheep, and they're grazing in the wild valleys, in the valleys wild. So this is a responsible adult. He's responsible for taking care of the sheep. You have to have skill, you have to have know-how. And interestingly, skill know-how is suggested by the fact that we're not born being able to play a musical instrument, but he pipes songs of merry cheer. That's something that's gained by experience. In the course of the poem, the child tells the shepherd, first pipe a song about a lamb, then the second command, pipe it again. Third command, drop thy pipe, thy happy pipe, sing thy songs of happy cheer. So the shepherd sings the song, and now he can add words. The child weeps with joy when he hears the words. Finally, the child commands the shepherd to sit down and write a book that all may read, and the child vanishes. So as technology increases, the voice of innocence recedes. It never disappears completely. He vanished from my sight, but I'm still obeying his command. In order to write the book, the shepherd plucks a hollow reed and stains the water clear. So this plucking and staining, these are very highly connotative words, and they connote, rather gently, they connote violence and violation. And I'm reminded of the fact that the sheep, which are symbolic of innocence, they're herbivores, they're not carnivores, and they're never going to grow out of being sheep. They're rather concentratedly, rather assiduously cropping the grass. They're grazing, so they're plucking the grass from Mother Earth, and this is how they sustain themselves. Okay, I want to look at a second song of innocence. This one is called The Lamb. And again, the visual imagery is highly supplemental to the imagery of the text. You don't get the whole picture from either the picture alone or the text alone. So, for example, in Piping Down the Valley's Wild, you wouldn't necessarily get it that the adult is a shepherd unless you see these sheep grazing. So the situation is somewhat similar in The Lamb. The visual design is also somewhat similar with significant differences, somewhat similar to the frontispiece that we looked at with this plant life sort of covering the scene, and sort of an ideal world above and a real world below. In The Lamb, we have similar kind of embrace of the trees over the scene and the idealized notion of a child who is not bound by gravity, but the lower part of the image is the real world. There are really sheep that graze. Now, in this poem, The Lamb, have these very willowy plants and lots of spiral tendrils, lots of sort of apparent violation of gravity, embracing the text. In between the two stanzas of the poem, I hear a sound, but I don't know what it is. In between the two stanzas of the poem, the trees almost meet in the middle, but they don't divide the two stanzas one from another. And in the bottom, just in the lower third, we see the image of a naked boy with his feet on the ground, making a rather theatrical gesture toward a lamb who's looking up. Now, it's rather theatrical, rather oratorical gesture. The child is reaching up to the lamb, and the lamb is extraordinarily attentive for a lamb. Okay. And the text reads, "Little lamb, who made thee?" Now, as a child, I had lots of religious instruction back in the middle of the 20th century. And the form of that instruction very frequently took the form of catechism. Catechism is a method of rote education in which there are very defined answers to a very defined set of questions. And the first question in the catechism that I endured in kindergarten, first, second, third grade, really right up till I was 12 years old and got confirmed, I had to answer catechism questions. And you have to recite a formulated answer. So the very first question is, who made you? And the answer, which I will never forget, is God made me. God made me. The next question is, why did God make you? And the answer is much more complicated. So that's the question that the little boy is posing to the lamb. Little lamb, who made thee? And doesn't answer the question right away. It just kind of rewords the question and expands upon it. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Okay, now, in the Christian tradition, knowledge is the fall of man. Adam and Eve lose innocence because they eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. On the other hand, in Christianity, one achieves salvation in part from hearing the gospel, from knowing that salvation is available, and knowing how to go about achieving salvation. I'll give you a hint, you don't do it alone. So, little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? So two very different questions. One very simple question. I mean, there's a factual answer to who made you. Dost thou know who made you? That's a more complicated question. Now, here's an issue that you and I, dear listener, know how to read, I presume, unless there are pre-literate children tuning in, which is fine, but we know how to read. We can read to pre-literate children, and the children can look at the pictures and understand the supplementation of picture and text. But we who are able to talk about this poem, read this poem and talk about it, we are highly experienced. I mean, we're literate. That's kind of the epitome of experience. And of course, literacy opens the door to all sorts of experience that one can't enjoy directly. You remember back in the introduction, the child said, Piper, sit thee down and write in a book that all may read. So I wrote my happy songs every child may joy to hear. So a pre-literate child can hear the words of the text, but can't read them directly. And so this is the epitome, as in the frontispiece with the mother and the children. This is the epitome of the healthy relation of innocence and experience. So the child is teaching the lamb. Now, I'm perfectly willing to allow that animals have understanding. Uh, I feel pretty confident, though, as an experienced adult, that the lamb is not going to answer the question. Child says, do you know who made you? The little lamb is not going to say yes or no. The little lamb is going to say bah, if anything. And then the child starts kind of making statements that are part of a question. I mean, there's a big long question that starts with does and ends with rejoice. But in the middle, the child is kind of just showing what he, the child, knows. Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and o'er the mead. Gave thee clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly bright. That's so interesting to me. Here's this naked little boy who's praising the clothing of the lamb. And of course, when Adam and Eve eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, they realize that they're naked and they're ashamed. But little kids are not ashamed of nakedness. And this child certainly doesn't see clothing as a punishment or as an evasion of guilt. The child sees clothing, really he feels clothing. He sees it as bright and feels it as soft as clothing, woolly bright. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Now, the human voice is capable of song. The human voice is capable of speech. The capabilities of the lamb's voice is obviously much more limited. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Vales means valleys. We saw the piper piping down the valleys wild, and it was a wild place with trees everywhere. Sheep were eating among the trees, grazing among the trees. This is not the wild valley because look, there is a thatched cottage in the background. And so little kids do not and cannot live by themselves. Somebody with experience built that house. Somebody with experience lives in that house. Somebody with experience takes care of this little boy. Little lamb, who made thee, dost thou know? Who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee. See, I know, so I'll tell you. You're not going to tell me. This is slightly ominous. It's just a little bit troubling, a little bit. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Here's the problem. There is in the world such a thing as a doctrine, a teaching. And this is the idea of catechism. This is the idea behind catechism, that people ask questions. They're not questions, they're prompts. The teacher asks the question, and the pupil recites the answer. The pupil doesn't come up with an answer. The pupil recites the answer. And the answer has to be doctrinally correct. It has to be the true doctrine. So it's not a fact question. What's the capital of Montana? The capital of Montana is Helena. It's a doctrinal question. Who made you? God made me. Why did God make you? God made me to know him, love him, and serve him. So if I say God made me because he felt like it, or God made me to make me happy, that's not the right answer. There is one right answer, and it's the one answer that is correct doctrine. So the little kid, obviously, playing teacher, something I played a ton of when I was a kid. I didn't really think I was going to be a teacher, but I played teacher a lot with my little brother. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Little lamb, I'll tell thee. Now, he could have just said God. That would have been the doctrinally correct answer, but there's something funny going on here. He is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. Now, the name of God, the name of the Creator, is dangerous territory. I mean, we give blessings in God's name. The name of God is kind of taboo, and it's very strange when you think about it. That in English, we think the name of God is God, which is merely the German word for a God. Or we use a circumlocution, an evasion, like the Lord. I mean, God does have a name, which is spelled JHVH, conventionally pronounced Jehovah or Yahweh or Yahweh. But that's kind of taboo. And so, I mean, from the earliest parts of the Bible, or from the most ancient parts of the Bible, the name of God is generally not spoken. Uh, and so instead we have these evasive uh, terms like Elohim, which is a plural, pretty strange. He calls himself a lamb. So notice a lamb can't be a name, right? So I'm not a Dr. Kelly. I mean, I am a Dr. Kelly. There are others. But if I say I'm a Dr. Kelly, that's not a proper name. He calls himself a lamb, period. He is meek and he is mild. He became a little child. Now, you know, um, I hear little 3-year-olds singing, "Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. Yes, Jesus loves me. The Bible tells me so." Um, so there's some difficulty, certainly, some complexity, some mystery. If we think about the Creator in the same sense that we think about the Redeemer, certainly the image of Jesus, especially Jesus laid in a manger as an infant, is meek and mild. And certainly the adult Jesus takes on the crucifixion with meekness and with mildness. However, the destroyer of Sodom and Gomorrah, the Old Testament Yahweh, is not meek and mild. I mean, he destroyed the whole world except for the family of Noah. Um, so um, clearly, the child, I mean, to put it mildly, not to say meekly, the child hasn't thought through or hasn't been taught the distinction and somehow the unity of the Creator and the Redeemer. He only thinks about the Redeemer. And yet the question is, who made me? He became a little child, period. I a child, and thou a lamb, we are called by his name. Now I know a lamb is called a lamb, but I too am called a lamb. How can that be? I a child, thou a lamb, we are called by his name, and he calls himself a lamb. Now, we can say that the child is just playing teacher. And of course, play is a child's work. Play is how a child works through childhood um, and gains experience. The lamb is not going to gain experience in the same way that a child is going to gain experience. Uh, and the child seems to know from experience, his feet are on the ground, he seems to know from experience that this is how you learn, that you are taught facts or perhaps doctrines by grown-ups. And he's pretending to be a grown-up. The problem is he can't really work his way through the doctrine. Now, there are several ways to think of this. One would just be that he doesn't know. He knows that he enjoys the lamb. He knows that he likes to hear the lamb's voice that makes all the veils rejoice. He's particularly taken, is this child, with the sensuous quality of the lamb, with his clothing of delight, softest clothing, woolly, bright. He, so he's just kind of working things through. Another way to look at it would be that he understands better than his teachers do, this child. That maybe our idea of a vengeful creator is just not the right idea. And certainly the creator who punishes Adam and Eve for eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, that's punishes them with death for eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge, when we know that in the real world where people stand on their feet, people gain knowledge, often from direct experience, often from, forgive me, books. So it can't be an avoidable error or a punishable offense to gain knowledge. So, as with the child on the cloud, instructing the piper, literally giving the piper instructions, commands, the child is speaking a truth, perhaps, that he doesn't know. A deeper truth than the doctrine would permit. Little lamb, God bless thee. Little lamb, God bless thee. And what does he mean by that? I think he just means approval. God bless you, little lamb. You're the best. Okay, so next time we read the lamb, next time we're going to read the tiger. And it's the same question. The language is so shockingly different in the tiger. All in the lamb, it's like, I know that little kids don't really say softest clothing. Little kids don't really say called by thy name, but it's a song, right? But the language in this poem is primarily monosyllabic in the lamb. And it's pretty simple language. But the tiger asks the same question, but it's asking the question now, not from the point of view of a child who's just learning, but from the point of view of experience, an adult who has suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, and is asking, who made this tiger? And we'll talk about that next time. We'll look at the picture, and we'll talk about the first of a song, the first for us of the songs of experience, the tiger. And so we'll move next time from songs of innocence to songs of experience. Okay. Thank you, my friends. Drop me a line, leave me a message at appreciatingpoetry4.wordpress.com, and I'll see you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, there's a chat. Oh, it's a thank you. Well, thank you, TA. Bye-bye. See you next week, everybody.